Victorian seances were not magic. They were, however, some of the boldest cons in history. They faked knocking sounds. They rigged tables to lift themselves up. They hired actors to whisper in the dark, and grieving mothers paid for them over and over because they wanted so badly to believe. But one medium, she got caught red-handed, mid-seance, in front of witnesses. And what she was actually doing is so much stranger than what anyone expected. Hi friends, I'm Betty Rage, your favorite nerdy goth mom, and welcome to Lashes and Lore. And if you're new here, this is where we tell dark stories, we dissect the lore people kind of glossed over for centuries in my own little way. And occasionally we get genuinely unreasonable about how far people will go to profit off of someone else's grief. For those of you who are just joining us, these granny squares are all a part of what we're calling our Frankenblanket, our Blankenstein, our Franket, all of those names, first, middle, and last. Anyway, it's happening here in the background of every episode. I sit here and crochet these squares while we talk about our stories, and every scrap of yarn was thrifted, pulled from some kind of sweater or yarn skein that was headed to a landfill until I pulled it apart. Today we've got black in this like coppery red-ish orange. Yeah, we might be doing another Halloween square, whatever, it's fine. Let me live. Gosh, we have no idea really what this blanket will look like in the end, but that's okay because maybe it's a metaphor for, how we're all very different from one another and come from very different places. But when you put us together just right, we can make something weird and beautiful. I don't know. Is that the metaphor I'm going for with the blanket? I don't know. I really just needed something to do with my hands while I tell these stories. Otherwise, it might take me 6 hours to make a video. All right, so let's talk about seances. We cannot talk about Victorian seances without starting with the sisters who started the whole thing. Maggie and Kate Fox, 2 kids in upstate New York, bored, a little mean, and about to accidentally invent an entire religion. In 1848, they told their mother a ghost was knocking on the walls of their house. It wasn't a ghost, it was their toes. Turns out, if you crack the joints in your foot just right, it sounds exactly like a knock from beyond the grave. They practiced, and they got good at it. Good enough to fool their own mother, which I guess is pretty good because moms kind of know when you're lying. Well, or maybe just my kids lie a lot. But not only were they fooling their own mother, eventually they started to fool the neighbors, and the neighbors grew into basically the entire country. So their older sister, Leah, took over managing them, like older sisters do, and the family built a full career out of it. Public seances, paying audiences, famous fans, and this went on for 40 years. 40 years, friends! 2 little kids cracking their toe joints turned into 2 decades of paying customers convinced that they were talking to their dead relatives. And I don't know if anybody's taken this and studied it in business school, but it absolutely should be because Maggie eventually confessed that it was all fake. Stood on a stage in front of thousands of people and demonstrated exactly how they did it. And spiritualism did not die. People just decided that she was lying about lying. And that to me is a masterclass in audacity. And the Fox sisters were just the opening act. Once spiritualism took off, mediums got creative. They would use wrist cuffs with hooks under the sleeves strapped onto the table to lift it without anyone seeing a hand move. A kitchen knife tucked up a sleeve slid under the edge of a light table to make it rock and jump. Hooks built into a belt worked with a knee or a foot while both hands were busy above the table being held by very trusting sitters. Right? Hold hands. Chimney boys got paid a penny to hide in the flue and knock on cue. Trick candles were made with a dead husband's cologne baked right into the wax, so the room would suddenly smell like him. Assistants in costumes slipped through little trapdoors and sliding panels while everyone's eyes were adjusting to the dark. Light the candles, turn out the lights, hold hands, and the dark was the whole point. Every seance happened in a dimly lit room because a dimly lit room is where a hook, a wire, or a guy in a sheet actually work. This was staging, full theatrical productions, charging admission and calling it the afterlife. And once mediums figured out photography was, new enough that most people didn't understand how it worked, things got even bolder. Enter William Mumler, jewelry engraver who was turned photographer, who claimed that his camera could catch spirits that the human eye couldn't see. He was charging $10 a sitting, where a normal photo costs $2. And grieving families were lining up. His most famous client was Mary Todd Lincoln. Yeah, that one. Who sat for a portrait and left with a photo of herself next to the ghostly outline of her assassinated husband. The problem was, some of those ghosts were still alive. People kept recognizing Mumler's spirits as their neighbors, their friends, people who very much still had a pulse. And he ended up on trial for fraud, and then P.T. Barnum, a man who built an entire empire on humbugs, testified against him. The irony. Even Barnum thought that this was a bridge too far, which is saying something. We probably should do a video on Barnum, and it won't be a musical. Mumler, though, was acquitted because nobody could actually prove how he actually did it. He kept working. People kept paying. Mary Todd Lincoln kept that photo until the day that she died. So if these tricks were just obvious, why did anyone fall for it? Well, because Victorian England was drowning in grief. The fact of the matter is that child mortality was so high that roughly 1 in 5 children did not make it to their 5th birthday. Add in disease, war, and life expectancy that made death a constant house guest, and you get a whole society that was just desperate for any evidence that the people that they lost weren't actually gone. Queen Victoria herself sat for séances at Osborne House as early as 1846, and after Prince Albert died in 1861, a teenage boy claiming to channel messages from him became part of her life for years. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was a devoted believer, dragging her skeptical husband, Robert, along to séance after séance. Even the people who hated spiritualism couldn't escape it. Charles Dickens, yeah, that one, spent years publicly ripping mediums apart in print, calling one of them a ruffian, and after he dies, mediums claimed his own ghost was finishing his unfinished novel for them. He would have hated that so much. And this wasn't just about grief. Spiritualism gave women a rare kind of power in a world that barely let them own property. Being a medium meant that you could hold a room, command attention, be taken seriously as a spiritual authority, all without directly challenging a single social rule. So, believing wasn't stupid, believing was human, and the people running these seances knew exactly how to use that. And speaking of things that aren't what they appear to be, this granny square looks like scraps. It's actually a part of something bigger. And unlike a Victorian seance, I can prove it. If you want pieces from my sustainable crochet shop, all made from thrifted and upcycled yarn, head over to my shop now, Reanimate Threads. Here's a link, and you can get something there, like this adorable cozy for your skinny can. I have them for regular cans as well, like this one, or purses, or yoga straps, and I'm constantly making new things. And of course, it's still Summerween, so you can still use the code 5OFF30 to get $5 off your purchase of $30 or more. So you can get something cool, original, and made by me. And due to the nature of my resources, what you get is literally going to be one of a kind. I will never have that same sweater again, most likely. I've not ever come across the same sweater twice, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. Because honestly, the best way to support this show and what I'm doing here is to support my shop. Hey, thanks. Right, so back to the seances. So eventually, people actually started checking. Scientist William Crookes ran controlled experiments on mediums in the 1870s, trying to bring some kind of actual rigor to the question. And not everyone bothered with rigor, though. Some people just grabbed the ghost, you know? Madame Desperance built a whole career on a spirit that she called Yolande. Yolande would supposedly materialize out of her body during seances. In 1880, a sitter in the room got tired of watching and grabbed Yolande mid-materialization. Turned out Yolande was Madame Desperance in her underclothes, like standing right where the medium was supposed to be. So the Society for Psychical Research started treating fraud investigation like actual detective work, traveling around the UK and even to India to catch mediums in the act. People started calling them the Victorian Ghostbusters, and then came Houdini, a magician who knew every trick in the book because he built half of them himself. He spent decades literally exposing mediums on stage, in print, in front of Congress. He even became friends with Arthur Conan Doyle, the one who wrote Sherlock Holmes. Which, hilariously enough, Arthur Conan Doyle is the man who created the most rational detective in fiction, and he believed in spiritualism with his whole entire heart. But the friendship between Houdini and Doyle fell apart over a fake message from Houdini's dead mother, written in perfect English by Conan Doyle's wife. Houdini's mother barely spoke English at all. The friendship never recovered, and neither did spiritualism's credibility. Not really. Not once people started, grabbing the ghosts, literally, Madame Desperance. So what actually happened to these people once they got caught? Well, really not much, honestly. Madame Desperance kept performing for, another 13 years after getting caught red-handed. William Mumler got acquitted and kept selling ghost photos. The Fox sisters confessed, recanted, and spiritualism kept growing anyway. Because people wanted to believe more than they wanted the actual truth. And you can't really blame them for that. But the grifters mostly landed a fine. A little embarrassment maybe, but, they were still working, so still getting paid. The people who lost something were always the ones in the audience. The widow who bought a candle because it smelled like her husband. The mother who paid a chimney boy's wages without knowing it, and the people who needed to believe so badly that they let a stranger profit off exactly how much they missed someone. And that's the real cost of this entire industry, not reputations. Grief sold back to the grieving over and over, and almost nobody involved in selling it ever really paid for it. And unfortunately, for anyone who actually is into things that are considered spiritualism, it discredits anything that you may actually be able to garner from it. And to that I say, do what you're going to do, whatever. But don't commit fraud. And the part of this that actually kind of stings the most as a mom is a lot of people going to these seances weren't just grieving, they were parents grieving a child, and in an era where child mortality was terrifyingly common. And I understand on some level. I really don't want to understand what that kind of desperation could do to a person, to a parent. As a parent, you do literally anything to make sure that your child is safe. You do anything to protect them from pain. So imagine that instinct with nowhere left to go because the person you're trying to protect is already gone. Someone shows up promising you one more conversation, one more chance to say something, one more sign that they're okay. Of course you'd pay for that. Of course that you'd want to believe it, because why wouldn't you? There's nowhere left to put that love. And these mediums knew exactly what they were selling and who they were selling it to. And no, I didn't forget about D&D, because D&D doesn't have an official spiritualist class, but the Bards, College of Spirits, can literally perform a seance. They use a spirit board or a tarot deck as their spellcasting focus to commune with the spirit world, which means that you can play a Victorian medium, and depending on how your DM rules, you could be genuine or a complete con artist running the exact same tricks those real fraudsters used, or because it's D&D and you actually do talk to the spirits could maybe help you with your fraud. Nobody said you have to be a good person in the game. Sometimes you just have a story, okay? And the new Ravenloft book released a new Tarot deck. Tarot deck. So this is like tarot deck. So this could be like your spellcasting focus in your D&D game if that's something that you want to do. A Victorian era D&D game where you play a spiritualistic bard that performs seances. Kind of sounds like a vibe. Now I want to play in this game. Do that. Have fun. Tell me about it. It's kind of wild, though, because a bard with this deck is doing exactly what those Victorian spiritualists claimed to do, channeling spirits through divination tools. But the difference is in D&D, it actually works. I'm not saying that no one in this world can actually do that. I'm just saying that there was a serious issue with fraud and spiritualism in this time period. So, if you are a medium and you are watching this, girl, guy, they, whatever, go on with your bad self. Do your thing. So the next time that somebody tells you that they can talk to your dead relative for, the low, low price of $10 a sitting, maybe ask a few follow-up questions before you sit down. Plus, now we have the internet, so you can look up anything about anybody. So here's our square. Kind of a burnt orange and black look today. Make sure you comment the word seance down below and tell me if you have fallen for any of this before or if you've heard these stories about these fraudulent seances in the Victorian era. Another granny square down for our Frankenblanket, and I still don't know what it's going to look like when it's done, so. And if you want more Victorians lying straight to your face, you can go watch this video that I did about arsenic. That's a good one. Same energy, but more poison. And remember, grief doesn't need a con artist. It just needs time. I'm Betty Rage, and this is Faye, and this was Lashes and Lore. Be good to each other, love each other, make good choices, and as always, free mom hugs from me to you. Bye. I'll see you in the next one. Okay, you're child girl with stinky breath. Okay.